Hey, how's it going, everybody? I hope and pray that your day is great. We're going to be dealing with James chapter 5, the first 7 verses today. And really, I just need the first 6 verses, but verse 7 is still dealing with those 6 verses, so I'm going to touch on it just briefly. And then on our next devotion, I'll pick 7 up again and we'll go from there, but you'll see what I'm talking about. So we're looking at James chapter 5, verses 1 through 7. If you have your Bible and want to read along with me, that'd be great. It says this, "Go to now, you rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and you trust of them, and the trust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth. And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you." Verse 7, "Be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it until he receive the early and latter rain." Now, there's a lot that we could talk about in these 7 verses, but the thought that is, I would say, the most base or foundational application here, well, a couple, but what he's dealing with is rich men and how they obtain their riches. Now, when you look at this, you think that he's just talking to rich people. You know, all of these verses are just rebuke. You've obtained your riches through deceitful ways, and you don't use your riches to do the right things with them, and you oppress the poor and that sort of thing. And it is a rebuke to the rich. But I really feel like these 6, 7 verses are really dichotomous in the sense that not only is James giving a warning to rich people, but probably primarily he's talking to poor Jews and poor Christians, or probably the audience of this book is the same, Jewish Christians. And of course, thank God we have the book of James and we can glean from it also. But he's trying to tell them this is how rich people, a certain type of rich people, conduct themselves. This is how they obtain their finances and their wealth. This is how they treat you. And this is what you need to do, or at least this is the mindset that you need to have. So there's a lot here. If we wanted to, we could just focus on James rebuking the rich, or we could focus on James speaking to the church and explaining to them what riches and wealth does to a person, or potentially can do to a person, or how he is admonishing them to be kind and gentle and patient. I think that that's probably the most direct lesson that he's trying to tell the church: be patient. And so let us look at these verses, break them down real quick, and I'll be done. So he says, "Go to now, you rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. And your gold and your silver is cankered, and the trust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. You have heaped treasure together for the last days." So a couple things here. Riches in themselves is not wrong. You know, the Bible does not say that money is the root of all evil. And I know that that's been misquoted many, many times. But what Paul actually said was the love of money is the root of all evil. And there's a difference there. There are people that are wealthy that gained that wealth through honest means. They didn't lie, they didn't cheat, they didn't step on the heads of other people getting there. They worked hard, they sacrificed, they put in the effort, they were gifted at whatever it was that they did to gain that wealth. And now they are successful and wealthy and have X amount of stuff. And they did that in a way that was okay. It was not necessarily right or wrong, but it was just making money through the sweat of your brow, okay? Now, he's not talking to that type of rich person. Rich people like that are honest, that are good, they're going to be using their money for positive things. It's not to say that they're not going to bless their family, they're not going to have some things, they are. But at the same time, those type of people are generous. Men like J.C. Penney. Now, I don't know a lot about him, but I read some about him. And if the story is true, he started out tithing, giving 10% of what he made. And at the end of his life, he was actually giving 90% back to the church, back to the kingdom, and philanthropic, I guess you would say, ventures and things like that. In other words, he was very generous. You know, he gave. And so when you look at a guy like that is giving away 90% and keeping 10%, you understand that there has to be something inside of him, whether it be Christianity or not, which my understanding is J.C. Penney was a Christian. But James is not talking about that type of rich person. He's talking about a man who basically obtains his wealth any way he can get it, whether it be corrupt, whether it be through lying, stealing, cheating, or even if it's through a means that would be considered right and proper. But behind the scenes, he's abusive to his employees. He's oppressive to them. He's not paying them like they should. There's a lot here. There's also this truth here. He is saying they have accumulated massive wealth and they're not using it to bless anybody. And the really ironic thing is, as James is saying, they're not even using it to bless themselves. You look here, he talks about their garments are moth-eaten. He says, you've accumulated so much stuff, you can't even use it. You're not blessing other people, and you're not even using it yourself. You know, your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered. You're not even investing it. You're not pouring it. You're not throwing it out into the markets and the exchangers and allowing it to grow. You're not giving to the poor. You're just really accumulating wealth just for the sake of accumulation. And James says this is horrible. Now, a couple more things, and I think that I'll be able to close this out. He is telling the Jewish Christians here, and any Christian that's going to read this, you and I'm not a Jew myself, but I am a Christian, and the book of James is one of my favorite books in the entire Bible because of its practical nature, because of its hard-hitting truths that just get right down where you're living at. I think that James is talking to poor people, and he's saying to them, you have to be careful about how you conduct yourself with these type of people, because if you're not real careful, you'll feel like God has forsaken you. And he kind of goes down that trail there, and he ends like this in verse 6. He says, to the rich person, he said, you've condemned and killed the just. And there's a semicolon there, and he says, and he, the just, doesn't resist you. So in other words, you rich people that are corrupted by riches and accumulating and all these things, and you're hurting, and you're by frauds, you're gaining more, and all of these things. You can read it again for yourself, and you'll see a little clearer what we're talking about here. But he says you feel like you are abusing them, or at least using them without any type of, there's no consequence to your action. But verse 7, he says to us, the context, these poor Jewish Christians who are being martyred every single day, who are being run out of their homes, who are being mistreated, he says, be patient therefore, brethren. So he's talking to us. Be patient therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waited for the precious fruit of the earth. What he says is, you may feel like you're unprotected. And he's talking directly to a rich person. That is the direct context, but it's also spilling over to us. He's saying, rich man that is abusive, you need to know this. It may look like to you that these people that you're taking advantage of have no protection. And then he says to us, my poor people, you may feel like there's no one there taking care of you, that these people are manipulating you and hurting you. He said, but I want you to know that the Lord is your husbandman. He is watching over you, and he's going to come on the scene. He's going to right all of these things. Everything is going to be corrected. The coming of the Lord is nigh. And again, I'm going to deal with verse 7 in more detail on my next devotion. So I just wanted to lay those things out there, because, and I could probably take this to a place that a lot of you would be very uneasy about. because when we read in the scripture about rich people, we almost always take ourselves out of the equation, because all of us feel like we're poor. And you and I feel like we're poor because we compare ourselves to people like Bill Gates or Hollywood actors or movie stars, rock and roll musicians, these people that have all their Bentleys and their mansions and, that sort of thing. We're always comparing ourselves to them, and then when we do that, we feel poor. But if you go to Mexico, if you'll go to the Philippines or go to Africa, where we got a bunch of churches over there, and our orphanages in Malawi, which may be the poorest country in the world, depending on what year, it almost never ranks higher than the bottom 3. When you go and see real poverty, you realize that you and I are also accumulating things. And we actually get rid of our junk so we can buy more junk. If you go back to the book of Acts, Acts chapter 2, you'll see what the church is supposed to look like. You'll see the spirit of the New Testament church. And that is very clear, especially the latter part of Acts chapter 2. You'll also find it again in Acts chapter 4, that when they got saved, they began to sell their stuff. And they began to give it to the men of God, and they distributed it. That way everyone had. No one was doing without. If a person had 2 oxen, they only needed one, they sold one of them and gave. That way somebody else could be blessed. That was the spirit of the New Testament church. You don't see that much anymore. Pretty much everybody is so busy accumulating, they don't have time to really work for God. Most people that I know right now can't go to a midweek service. They only have time to go to about 2 or 3 Sunday services because they're so busy working Monday through Saturday. They think Sunday's the only day they have to spend with their family, which is weird to me, because going to the house of God, worshiping with the people of God is a family experience for the Lamb family. So when I hear people talking about, it's family day, we don't get to spend any family time. Well, why don't you teach your children that our family enjoys going to the house of God together and worshiping together? But hey, I digress on that. We are really rich. The fact that you have internet, the fact that you have a Facebook account, a YouTube, whatever account there, an app on your smartphone that you're able to watch and pay for cell phone bills and have a home, and all of these things that we have really makes us rich. If you have any of those things, a home, a car, a phone, you're richer than like 95% of the entire world. And you need to understand that. So let us be careful that we don't fall into this category here of accumulation without thinking about other people, without thinking about how we can bless. So these 6 verses, there's just a lot here. And I want you to be in prayer about it. Be careful about how you treat people. And on the same side of that, or I guess the other side of that, is if you find yourself in a place where you feel like you're being abused and misused, I want you to be careful not to feel abandoned or forsaken, because the Lord has got you in His scopes. He sees you, and He's going to come and He's going to right all the wrongs. So anyway, that's James chapter 5, 1 through 7. We'll see you on the next go-round. God bless.